lack the minerals and vitamins. Irons in the niacin. Fuck who that I fear. Rappers sit back, I'm about to sit back, sit back, I'm about to begin. Sit back, I'm about sit back, I'm about to begin.
All right, you are tuned in to the Fantasy Wire HQ podcast. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. Check them out online at fulltimefantasy.com. Thanks for jumping on today. I'm your host, Frank B. Follow me on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ. Bookmark the website at FantasyWireHQ.com. All kinds of good stuff coming out there on June. I've been hitting it pretty hot and heavy with a lot of fantasy articles, roundtable articles with some players that we're picking for 2020 in some categories. We've got a 32 for 32 series on Twitter. New team every day. Links back to the site where you can get some insight on those players I picked for that specific team. Try to pump out as much content as I can between now and the start of the official season, which hopefully starts on time. I think it will. But today, I appreciate you listening, and be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to the podcast currently. I've got a real good show today. I've got Derek, Alex, and Kevin from the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football. Find them on Twitter at GoodOldBoysFF. Give them a follow. 3 great minds in the fantasy community. Great NFL takes, great fantasy takes, great people. So check them out. Follow them. They also have a killer YouTube channel that is pretty hilarious. Not serious. Lots of fun. But when it comes time to the takes and the players, it gets serious. So it's really good stuff. So today what we were going to do is have an AFC West preview podcast. We're going to jump on, all of us, and talk about the AFC West. And we're going to start off with a NFL take on what we think these teams are going to do, and then we're going to jump into the fantasy aspect of things and jump into some categories for AFC West Pacific players. It's a great episode. I had a lot of fun recording it with them, and I think you'll have a lot of good nuggets in here. So check it out. And with that, here we go. All right, today we welcome Derek, Alex, and Kevin from the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football. Give them a follow on Twitter at GoodOldBoysFF, and you better subscribe to their YouTube channel. They got some great stuff on there. Comedy, hijinks, fantasy football, you name it, you can find it on there. So gentlemen, welcome to the show. How are we doing today?
Well, we're doing fantastic. You know, the weather's nice out there. One of us managed to get out there onto the links, but I'm not going to steal your thunder there, Alex. So, how was it today?
It was windy. It was breezy today up here in the Great White North. But it's still, better than doing anything else. Going golfing is better than doing literally anything else. Although podcasting with you guys is a close third.
Yes. Woohoo!
Oh. And that does pretty much summarize the Good Old Boys kind of mentality there. So make sure that you give us a follow. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Good Old Boys FF. We've also got the YouTube channel. Pretty good little outtakes we got going there. We got some player profiles over there. We got some good stuff there, as well as we've got the podcast, and it's available wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you listen to this one, you can probably search us, Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast, and subscribe to that as well. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, smash the subscribe button. Put some reviews up. Give it a share. All the good stuff there. I think, where's Kevin? I don't hear Kevin. He's hiding down in the bunker.
Nah, man, I'm here, dude. Normally, I feel like I dominate the airwaves of our own show, and it's not on purpose. So I try and make it a point when we're doing, guest spots that, I try and be respectful of your show and not railroad it like I do with ours sometimes.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. We're here to have fun and talk some NFL, some fantasy stuff. Today, we're going to talk about the AFC West, and wanted to get a little take action from an NFL actual playing the game perspective, and then dive into some fantasy stuff. So what we'll do today is we'll jump in team by team. Each of us is going to take a team and give just a real take on what we expect them to do in real life here, if the season will get started on time, which I think it will. And then we'll jump into some fantasy football categories and just talk about some players that we like in the AFC West from a fantasy perspective. So if Derek wants to lead us off, he can go with the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs.
That's still painful to hear.
Gross. That is so gross.
I only think of that.
Gross.
I only think of whoever their play-by-play guy is when he's like Kansas Senator. That's the only thing.
It's the best
only
play-by-play
hear.
though.
He's good.
You're right.
He's no Kevin Harlan, but he's good.
Yeah. Touchdown, Kansas City.
I'll tell you what. I'm a Ravens fan, and I can't stand the hay in the barn and all the shtick they do. Vikings guy Paul Allen. He's pretty good. I like when he goes off and gets pissed though. There's so many good play-by-play guys.
Character.
Yeah,
Paul
there's so
Allen's
many
character.
good ones. There's so many. So what do we think about the Chiefs, man? What are they going to do in 2020? How do you see them shaping up?
Well, it's one of those I can very much see the ceiling being, again, a repeat championship for them. They've got the pieces there. They're still young. They've still got a lot of talent there on both sides of the ball, and very talented on both sides of the ball. So when you think about it, they probably have the best quarterback in the league. From a fantasy perspective, that could be a little bit debated there, but from an actual, real life gameplay situation, they've got the best quarterback in the league. They've got some just amazing pieces around the wide receiver. They've got one of the better tight ends of the league. It seems like they've addressed some of the deficiency a little bit there, running back in the draft there a little bit. They're probably going to have another top 10 defense this year, and they probably are the team to beat this year. But it's one that when you look at it, they've got kind of the blueprint that you see a lot of other teams kind of going through and building around there as well. And you saw that kind of play out with a lot of the other kind of AFC West teams a little bit, where through the draft, they really addressed some of the speed and really started trying to bring in some of that deal that you see with Tyreek and with Miko Hardin, really being able to get some burners going and get some things on the outside there. And so it'll be interesting. I think that the Chiefs will definitely win the AFC West this year. And again, that's painful to say, being a Denver Broncos fan living here in Colorado. But
yeah,
I think they're going to be the team to beat for sure in the AFC West, but probably in the AFC. There's a few out there that may give them a run. The Ravens are probably going to put up a good deal this year, but it would not surprise me to see them in the Super Bowl again, defending their championship.
Yeah, they return their whole damn team. Everybody pretty much returns for the championship defense season, and I can't see them losing much. I mean, if they screw up, it's got to be one of them oddball games or some injuries maybe. But what about the big regression question everybody is always putting on Twitter? My God, I see that as soon as somebody has a good year. Yeah, but regression.
Well, regression's a real thing, and that does happen. But at the same time, too, you typically see regression happen from guys that overreached the previous year. And I don't know that you can look at this Chiefs team and really go that there's a player out there that really way overreached what their potential is and what they've done on a consistent basis year over year. You look at it, Patrick Mahomes actually had a little bit of a down year compared to the year before. He had some injuries there, here and there, but talent-wise, he's probably the best quarterback in the league, and I don't see a regression happening there. Tyreek has been very consistent. And in fact, when you look at it, they probably have a little bit better year statistically than they had the last year, because of the fact that you're basing this off of full 16 games of being healthy. But at the same time, Tyreek got hurt for a period last year, was out a few games. Mahomes was out a few games. Damian Williams was out a few games. So you saw a lot of guys kind of step up and fill in those holes. So if they're able to return the entire team like they did and everybody's healthy this year, it's a watch out kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's how I feel too when I look at that team and most damn near every player on it. It's like nobody really jumped out and overperformed, or you said, hey, this isn't them. They're just having a, magic carpet ride type season. I think they are what they are for the most part, and I really can't see them going backwards much at all, depending on how the schedule shakes down, injuries and other factors. But yeah, absolutely, they're the team to beat in the AFC West. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I think the only thing that can beat him is Andy Reid decides to shave that mustache.
Right. Yeah, the stash stays. You want victories, you want wins, you stick with the stash. Absolutely. Well, I'll take the Raiders here next for the greatness of the Raiders. The Vegas Raiders, man, last year 7-9. I think they're projected for 7.5 this year, and maybe the ceiling would be 9. But I looked around at the stats, and it was like, okay, so last year they were 24th in points scored and points allowed. For 2020, they've got the third toughest schedule, but they're getting 4 primetime games in Vegas, baby. Open up those doors, show us the Strip. I think that stadium kicks ass. I don't know why. I'm not like a huge Raider fan. I do like them, but I think that stadium is like the Death Star. I'm going to call it the Death Star here. But 4 primetime showcase games in that stadium. And then last year, they had 4 losses by 3 points or less. The Texans, Jags, Broncos, and Seahawks. And it's like, man, if they went the other way, I don't think we'd be looking as bad upon them as we do. But then when I dive into that defense, it's horrendous. They gave up 26 points a game, 24th ranked. They averaged 2 sacks a game, 0.5 interceptions, 0.9 forced fumbles. That's atrocious. But look what they dealt with too last season. I guess on offense, you got the Tyrell Williams injury, AB's situation, transition from Oakland, blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, they had a lot of shit going down during the season. But if you look at their acquisitions, they got Ruggs, Alabama receiver, out of the draft. They got Mariota to back up, so when Carr does go kablooey, they're going to throw Mariota in there. Maybe he goes in preseason and takes the reins and starts week 1. You never know with Gruden. I can't make sense of what that guy's going to do. I think there's a chance for some legitimate quarterback drama there. And then I thought their biggest pickup was Corey Littleton, linebacker from the Rams, 3-year, $36 million, 259 tackles since 18. He's a stud. He should make a difference there. The other back, they got Lynn Bowden out of the 3rd round. Jason Witten from the Cowboys. There you go, man. Book it. Lock it. Witten's there. I don't think he's going to do much. Everybody is pretty down on Waller, I guess, with the addition of Witten, but I don't really see Witten doing much at all. I mean, he was good for a few catches, few touchdowns. I think he's more there as like a mentor, run blocker possibly. I don't know. Protection. They need to protect the quarterback. Veteran depth, and their other tight end, Foster Moreau, he returns. He had a serious knee injury. So, and Brian Edwards, another receiver in the draft. Who was the guy that just got locked up or something today? Did you hear that? Was that their guy?
Bowden? With Bowden, so
yeah, he got locked up at his grandma's or something. I didn't read the whole story, so this is kind of fresh to me. But
so what I read was that he wasn't charged, but police did go into the home. Like there was a call made, and I don't have all the details, so I'm not going to speculate. But there was a call made for some reason. Police came. They ended up entering the home, but Bowden was not charged with anything at the time I read the article. So if anything has changed, that's been from about 1 o'clock Mountain Time until now. So it's possible things change, but very interesting. First, the guy, takes it, that was Ruggs. Ruggs gets his leg hurt, and now Bowden has the cops at his house. Like, this is typical Raiders stuff, man. Like,
it is. I think of Mayock up there, like, what the hell is going on? Like the Vince Lombardi, what the hell's going on out there? Yeah, that's kind of crazy. And then their losses. So the Raiders lose linebacker Tyrell Whitehead, DeAndre Washington, running back. He went over to the Chiefs. He bounced over. He's probably pretty damn happy. I guess, like, man, it's the 3rd year of Chucky. He's got a shit or get off the pot here, especially in a new digs in Vegas. Wow. I mean, I think he's got a lot of work to do, especially defensively. I thought the stats that I found interesting offensively were for first quarter scoring, they ranked 11th. Second quarter scoring, they ranked 13th. And then third, they ranked 32nd. Fourth quarter, they ranked 20th. So, I mean, they're giving up the ends of games here. They're just shutting it down. So, I think for 2020, the key is, like, they got to get a fast start and a strong finish. Obviously, they can get the fast start early in the games, first, second quarter, obviously, the stats show that, but they got to get a strong finish to end the season. And I think, I look at their schedule, the primetime games they got an ESPN against the Saints week 2. The Bucks come into town, Tom Brady, a little Gruden, Tampa Bay, you're going to see a ton of that retrospect. Sunday night football, Chiefs. Thursday night, they got a Chargers home game towards the end of the season. But if I look at look at the season and I break it down, right, I'm going to go 7-9, like a realistic run through the schedule, give them a win dog, give them a loss dog. If I throw in like a parity factor, the NFL parity factor, let's say they win 2 games they have no business of winning, which seems to happen to damn near every team in the league, give them a 9-7. I don't know. That's why I kind of put earlier their ceiling would maybe 9 wins. And then if you want to go a double shock value of parity finish, give them a 10-6 record. Absolutely. I don't know. No, I think the 7-9 is a more realistic landing spot for them in 2020. But for me, I think it'll be a fun season watching them, whether they implode or they do well, whether it's Gruden having a meltdown on the sidelines, a quarterback, like you said, Kevin, there's always something going down with the Raiders. It's just, what's it going to be? When's it going to happen? So we'll be all eyes and ears on that for 2020, without a doubt. Broncos. Think of Homer Simpson. The Denver Broncos. Kevin.
The Denver Broncos.
Give me the rundown.
Our hometown team.
Talk to me, baby.
So the Broncos have been in retool mode ever since Peyton Manning left the franchise, and that's kind of been the rhetoric that's been spewed for the last few years, right? We had Trevor Siemian, we brought back Brock Osweiler, we brought in Paxton Lynch, and we had Case Keenum in the meantime, and so on and so forth. And then in comes Drew Locke, and that's really the story around the Denver Broncos right now is Drew Locke and what he was able to show in a smaller sample size last year. But it was enough promise to see that team rally around that there's some pretty lofty expectations for the Broncos, not only in the future, but immediately. We'll kind of dive into this here in a second, but I think the absolute cap for the Broncos in a dream type season, you're talking about 12-4. Now, I think that's, again, a dream type season, but their schedule does play well to where if you were really wanting to argue someone, you could stand a fighting chance at 12-4. I think more realistically, they're 9-7, 10-6. Is where I see the Broncos finishing. They brought in Jerry Judy, who is on a lot of draft boards coming out of college as the best receiver. And if he's not the best, then he's right behind CeeDee Lamb. So he's a 1B type situation. They brought in Melvin Gordon from the Chargers in free agency to pair up with Philip Lindsay, largely in part because Royce Freeman. I don't know if you can necessarily be a 3rd-round bust, but Royce Freeman just has not panned out the way they wanted him to. They really thought he was going to be able to be a bell cow back with his accolades and what he was able to do at Oregon, and that just hasn't panned out at all. He looks slow. He looks undecisive. Most of his work actually came in the passing game last year. It wasn't running the ball. So, insert Melvin Gordon, who is a touchdown machine for a running back. He has a knack for the end zone. He's a little bit bigger bodied. He's kind of built to run in between the tackles, where Philip Lindsay I'm not going to say struggles, because if you look at his yards per attempt through the tackles, it's not bad, but it doesn't look right. If you're watching film, it doesn't look right how Lindsay gets those yards, and part of that was because of the offensive line. So Melvin Gordon kind of takes over that lead back role, I believe. You're going to see a good year out of him. Lindsay's going to fall into a more complimentary role. But the offensive line, they brought in a little bit of help, right? So they got a new guard from Detroit, I believe it was. So they're going to get some help line. They're still, the jury's still out on our holding machine, and I'm just going to leave it at that because I'm not going to speak his name.
The jury's not out.
Well, correct. They declined his 5th-year option on Garrett Bowles. There, I said it. So I think after this year they're going to be done. But they also addressed speed in the draft. So they got Jerry Judy in the 1st. They followed it up with KJ Hamler in the 2nd to pair up with Courtland Sutton, who is he's a true number 1 in the NFL. He's big, he's fast, he's rangy, he can high point the football. So he is clearly their one, and Judy's going to develop along the way. on top of Noah Fant, who showed flashes of greatness last year. If he can hold on to the ball, the sky's the limit. And that's just on the offensive side of the ball. And you flip over and you have Nick Chubb healthy again. So you'll have him and Vaughn, paired up again and seeing if they can, or Bradley Chubb. Sorry, I said Nick Chubb. Bradley Chubb. Him and Vaughn coming off the edges again. They brought in Jarrell Casey from Tennessee, and man, oh man, is he pissed.
Yes.
That the Titans let him go.
He's been talking a lot.
He has been talking a ton. So they brought in him to help shore up the defensive line. They let Derek Wolfe walk, right, wrong, or indifferent. He's another guy who served his purpose, but he never really flashed. He was a good name because it was fun to howl at him at the games. But, I think Casey's an upgrade there. And then they let Chris Harris walk, who ended up with the Chargers. But they brought in A.J. Boye, who, is probably a step down from Chris Harris in some areas, but he's also a little bit longer. He's a little bit rangier of a corner. So I think Fangio has some things that he'll be able to do with A.J. Boye as well. So I'm super excited about this Broncos team coming up. I think that they're going to end up 3-3 in the division, but I think outside of the division is where they really make their hay. Their toughest games outside the division are at the Saints and then at the Steelers, but then they also get the Titans at home. They get the Bills at home. So I do think there's a lot of possibility with this team, and really the sky's the limit for them to at least challenge Kansas City. I don't think they get there, but I think they can apply enough pressure that Kansas City won't be able to coast into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. The offense, I'm pretty excited for it. I mean, if it takes off the way it should and the way it looks on paper, I think that's a hell of an offense. And I don't think you're right. I don't think the Chiefs will have any easy ride to the division crown, and should be pretty exciting. Maybe some shootout style games between them this season.
Yeah, they'd need that. That's been their biggest flaw, right? Is they get behind early and they didn't have the firepower to catch back up. They just weren't built like that. I think this team is not that they want to get in shootouts. That's not going to be the design of this team. Fangio wants to lean on this defense. They want to, they still want to implement a lot of, zone running capabilities, but they will throw the ball a little bit more. As they test out, Drew Locke's ability to grow and stretch as a player and as a leader of this team. But I think the weapons on the outside will help. And when in doubt, speed. And they drastically improved in that one facet, if nothing else, this offseason.
Yeah, I think they took a big step. And now we'll jump over to the Chargers. And Alex was telling me before this was like his favorite team. He couldn't wait to cover him.
I love the Chargers.
Kidding.
They
are interesting.
Team, they're very interesting. It's rough. This schedule that they have laid out, and with what they've done in this offseason, you try to make sense of all of it. I mean, they've addressed some deficiencies on the line. You bring in a Brian Bulaga, you bring in a Trey Turner. You hope that those guys kind of shore up the offensive line. If there was anything that was fun, was watching Phillip Rivers get sacked like 30 times a game. Obviously, we're not going to see that this year because he is gone. They bring in a Linval Joseph, Chris Harris, kind of, try to address some things on the defense. I think their best move that they made was grabbing Kenneth Murray in the draft out of Oklahoma. I think that's going to be a piece that as soon as he kind of figures out the NFL, he's a dude that we're going to be, talking about just because of how good he is. Obviously, with their first pick, they bring in a quarterback to address the departure of Phillip Rivers. I don't know that Justin Herbert starts right away, but they have Tyrod Taylor, and from everything that I've read, Tyrod Taylor is probably going to be the starter at the beginning of the season. How long that lasts, we'll have to see. But you look at their schedule, and it's not fun. it's not a fun schedule. They have some long road trips, specifically week 4 and week 5. They're at Tampa Bay and at New Orleans. Now, I think I remember reading something where they're going to probably try and stay on the East Coast after the Tampa Bay game to try and avoid making 2 basically cross-country trips there. But then they have to go back to Florida in week 7 and play at Miami, and then out to Buffalo in week 12. So, like, there are some road trips that this team is going to have to endure throughout the course of the season. They kind of draw, it's a rough draw when you get the NFC South, which is, got a lot of teams that are in win now mode, and you pull the AFC East, which has, just good teams in it anyways. So I see him finishing 7-9. The departure of Phillip Rivers, I think, is going to be felt immediately. Not that I think that Phillip Rivers was, a great quarterback. I mean, he is a great quarterback, but I don't know that, Phillip Rivers would have done much better than 7-9 with the supporting cast that he has around him if he was still playing for the Chargers this year. So they have some bright spots. Austin Eckler's obviously a bright spot, but you lose a Melvin Gordon. That's going to be rough. That's hard to replace. And then you kind of, you lose him to an in-division rival. That's going to be even probably harder to stomach because he'll probably go off on you.
A couple good revenge games.
Yeah. So we'll see. But I see the Chargers going 7-9 this year. It's just, I think that they're building for the future. I don't see this team as a win now team, especially when you're considering that the division consists of the reigning Super Bowl champion and a Denver team that's much improved, a Vegas team that has improved, and while I think they're trying to play catch up to that, I just don't think that they're in the same level there. So this team, it's going to be kind of a rough go for them. They don't really have a fan base. They will be playing in a shiny new stadium that they share with the Rams, but it's going to be rough, and I think it's going to be rough for a while for the Chargers, at least until they can figure out their quarterback situation and try and dethrone the Chiefs in this division.
Yeah, it's always hard when you got the Super Bowl champ in the division, and then let alone it's like a 7-9 kind of mediocre fest, and it's only 2 teams in it, kind of. Or I remember the AFC North like that too for a while. Steelers, Ravens, Browns, and Bengals at the bottom no matter what. Now that's kind of shifting and the landscape's changing, but the AFC West is a good division when it's on. And I remember back in the day when it was Chiefs, everybody was all in it. I mean, that was a pretty good division. It was pretty exciting to watch every season. So hopefully you can get back to that. I think it will, but like you said, it seems like Tyrod Taylor, they're all in on this guy. Every time I hear the coach, on a sports show or interview, I mean, he's like, I know he's got to say all the right things, but I really think they are really all in on him. And then what do you think about, I mean, if you think about him in Buffalo, I mean, he had Robert Woods, Watkins, and I mean, he used to flash, but it's like, if he's got a decent line and a better line and, in LA, could he take the next step and be consistent? I don't know. It's hard. I can't really make sense of him, what to expect with the Chargers.
He flashed, but that was 5 years
ago. Oh yeah,
it
was way back.
In the NFL, it's a lifetime, So, and it's not exactly the same for quarterbacks in this league, but it's going to be an interesting year, especially whatever fan base they have in LA. When the Boo-Birds come out for Tyrod Taylor after he makes a silly mistake or something like that's, which to Tyrod's credit, he does not make silly mistakes very often, so that'll be hard to criticize that, but that's going to be tough. I guess the good thing is that there isn't a ton of fan base pressure, and that's probably the best thing that they have going for them, is that they can kind of meddle for a while and try to figure some things out, and not have the pressure of a fan base, trying
right.
to kick the coach out of town or run the quarterback out of town or what have you. I mean, they are in a position unlike the Broncos, where Broncos fan base expects greatness, expects playoffs every year. And And that's the expectation out of the fan base. And when they don't get that, they will let you know about that versus the Chargers. I think they're kind of in this, they can be in this rut for a little bit, if you want to call it that. And it's going to be okay. There's not going to be the fan base pressure.
I'll just go to the beach.
When you share a stadium. Yeah, when you share a stadium, it's not like it matters about ticket sales. The stadium's going to be just fine.
All right, good stuff, man. Gentlemen, that was great. Good insight there on the AFC West, but we got to take it to the fantasy land. The fantasy categories. I was thinking about breaking down 6 categories and take a look at some players, some fantasy players out of the AFC West and who we like in these categories. So to get it started, let me take the first category is going to be the top AFC West fantasy target. So the top target out of this division that I want in my fantasy squad. And then we'll go around the room. We'll each drop a player, and then we'll get to the next category, see where it lays. I have no idea what anybody picked, and this should be pretty interesting. So for me, I'm looking at the AFC West. There's a lot of different players I could take, and obviously I'd want the big names. I want Mahomes, or I want Tyreek Hill. And a lot of times, like every time in my drafts, I'm never at those top spots. I'm always forever and a day, I was always at the bottom of the drafts, whether it was like the randomized order. Oh, Frank's getting the 7 spot or the 10 or whatever. I'm always in that middle or end of the draft. So I've never had Mahomes. I've never had Tyreek Hill. So I always kind of concede those players, and I'm looking past, the top 5, 10 or whatever it is. So for me, I'd go Josh Jacobs because I want an RB1 for my squad. And I know, like I said, I'll concede Mahomes and Kelsey, Tyreek, all those guys. I never get them anyway. But he had a hell of a rookie season last year. He ran for 1,150 yardage, 7 touchdowns in only 13 games. The only area I thought that could be improved is the passing down involvement. I mean, Gruden talked a good game for a little while about getting him involved, and then it kind of peaked for a little bit, and then it went away. But I think he's perfectly capable of catching the ball out of the backfield, but he only saw 27 targets. So, I mean, you got to get the guy the ball a lot more. They seem to they'd rather roll with like the Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington on third downs this past season. So I think if Jacobs plays all 16, it's not a stretch to consider him a candidate for like a 2020 leader. If you get him plenty of targets, he picks up running the ball, barring injury. I think he's like a safe RB1. He's got top 5 upside, but the chips have got to fall his way offensively in the scheme of the Raiders. Gruden's got to get it rolling. Cater to him. I think he's a stud, and he can carry the offense. So we'll see how it shakes out. Anybody that wants to jump up next, just call it. We'll go around the room. If Alex, you want it, since you finished off the Chargers and kind of jump back onto something positive. I know, you know what I mean?
Well, I guess for the top fantasy target in the AFC West, I was going Pat Mahomes. If you can get Pat Mahomes on your team, you're gonna be okay.
That's right.
I think that he's a guy that's worth, no matter really what league you're in, what style of league you're in, Pat Mahomes is going to put up points for you. So the earlier, the better, I think, with Pat Mahomes. Now, I know that some of my co-hosts on on our podcast are very quarterback late. That's how they view a draft. But, Pat Mahomes, you cannot go wrong with this guy. I just think that he is a point machine. And for fantasy purposes, what you want. So I'm going Pat Mahomes.
Lock him up.
Yeah, I'll just disagree with you. I'm in the quarterback late camp, and you can't talk me out of that. So now, to be fair, there's some things to be said about that, because if you are playing in a super flex type of deal, yes, Pat Mahomes in the first round. You're silly if you're sitting there in the late deal and he falls to you, right? Like,
right.
At that point, the quarterback becomes that much more important. And yes, now Pat Mahomes makes sense. But I'm a guy that always constructs my team based off a running back in the first round. Like, it takes something strange to happen for me to come off of a running back for the first round. And out of all of that, I've got to agree with you that Josh Jacobs is going to be the best back there. I know when we did our consensus rankings for our show, we had him as the running back 11 on that. So that's one of those that I'm I'm going to be putting Josh Jacobs there. I think that you'll see a little bit of disappointment again happen this year from a receiving work. I think from a running workload, he's going to get all the rushing attempts that he can handle, and then probably some because of the way John Gruden loves to run running backs on those squads. But the fact that Jalen Richard's still on the squad, the fact that they just drafted Bowden and they said that they're going to develop him as a running back, I see him picking up a lot of passing work there as well. So I think there's some limited upside, but I think his floor is very firmly in running back 1 territory.
Yeah, I am going to agree with the Josh Jacobs sentiment, and for very much the same reasons that Derek, you and Frank have listed off. If it's a redraft, then absolutely, I'm going Jacobs. Typical, quarterbacks you can fall, and I just see, from a fantasy perspective, the value that I can get at quarterback late for the round that I'm able to get them and build a team around it is far better when I wait on a quarterback than if I pass on, a true, workhorse back or an RB1 and then try and make that up later. That's a lot harder to make up that point gap. And so for fantasy purposes, I'm taking Jacobs there for the AFC West target. Real life, if we're starting franchises, yeah, it's Pat Mahomes, no doubt. Like, that's a no-brainer. But for fantasy purposes, it's Josh Jacobs. John Gruden is absolutely going to run this kid ragged through his rookie contract, and I want to be on the beneficiary side of that and collect as many of those points as I can, because I don't expect him to do much after his second contract starts, because he's going to have a lot of tread on his tires.
Oh yeah. Well, we're all in agreement there. The next category will be AFC West best value pick outside of the top 25, and the top 25 can mean a number of different things to each depending on your viewpoint. So if you want to look at it, whether it's a top 25 out of one specific position or it's an overall, we're going to go like that either way. I looked at it for my take as a top 25 running back category, position only. So when I look at the value, I'm looking at all the factors. I just want more positive factors that a player can have, the better, meaning like his overall situation, not just a big name guy that could fall on one stupid thing or a bad preseason or something. But I'm diving way down into the fantasy SUA system for this one, and I'm going Justin Jackson on the Chargers. Jackson was effective in limited work in his career, and he had the trio, the committee last season. He was always third in the pecking order in the Chargers backfield, but Gordon's in Denver. We talked about that. Jackson's got a real chance to see consistent touches for the first time in his career, a bigger slice of the pie. Eckler, to me, he doesn't have the same kind of frame to stand up to a workhorse role. He's going to do good. Whatever happens, but I don't see him as a full-time share workhorse back. And the fumble issues that he had near the goal line last year, they also have Josh Kelly in there as a threat to Jackson. But this season, with the corona and all that crap, it's a limited offseason, so everything is completely out of whack and upside down. The only advantage that Jackson has in that is, he's got first crack at seeing 10 touches a game, goal line work probably behind Eckler, because he knows this system. He's already been in the offseason. He knows the playbook. He's fine. With Kelly, he's got a little bit to go. Not saying he never gets in there. Maybe he gets in there at some point in the season. You never know how the offense plays out. But I think Jackson's a guy, if he's looking me in the face late in a draft, and people passed him over and he's sliding way down there, it's like, shit, I'm going to take the guy, throw him on. You never know what happens if Eckler does get hurt and he's out. Then you got somebody as an RB1, you got Kelly behind him. So I think it works out in all factors for you from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the AFC West in general has a ton of value outside the top 25, depending on what metric you're looking at. Like, there's a ton of options here. So even if you just go overall, guys who aren't in the top 25 would be Cortland Sutton, who in my opinion, is wide receiver 8 or 9 this year. You have Keenan Allen, who does nothing but put up 1,000-yard seasons and 7 touchdowns. And then if you want to go a little bit deeper, then you're looking at like a Miko Hardin. If you're looking for a late stretch, you want a piece of this Kansas City offense somewhere as you're drafting. Like that's something that you want to try and target. You want a piece of the Kansas City passing game. And if you can position yourself for a piece of, the Ravens running game later in a draft, that's another thing that you want. But for the AFC West purposes, I mean, Philip Lindsay is another one. If Melvin Gordon gets nicked up, Lindsay steps right back up into being a, top end RB2 with the amount of work that he's going to get on that team. And he's already going to be getting partial work to begin with. So his floor is lower than what it has been the last couple seasons, but he still has a solid floor. Fangio is not going to completely phase him out. They just brought in someone who's a little bit better than him at the moment. So there's just a ton of value. I mean, you can go through the list. Another guy who's falling off the rails, and I'm grabbing every piece of my can is Damian Williams. Damian Williams, and we said this on our show last night, and I've said this ever since the Super Bowl. Damian Williams should have been the Super Bowl MVP, not Pat Mahomes. That was Damian Williams who won that game for them. And everyone's just, anointing Clyde Edwards-Hilaire as, he's a top 12 pick. How do you not have him in the top 12? We just did rankings and we got blasted for not having him in the top 12. Blasted. For the reasons that you just said. He's a rookie running back coming into a system where they don't have a terrible guy in place and the offseason is connected. So, yes, we don't have him in the top 12. He's going to be a good back. But Damian Williams, I mean, you're drafting him as late as RB30 in some cases. Yeah. He's going to finish better than RB30. So there's automatically there's value built in from the time you hit the draft button. So, I guess through all the ranting and name dropping that I just did, my pick is Damian Williams for the most value where you can draft a player in this upcoming 2020 season.
Yeah, Williams to me feels like, remember Spencer Ware when he dropped? Everybody just completely forgot about that guy. And it was like, how is he still on the board? And I picked him up in a lot of drafts and he saved my ass a couple seasons. But yeah, it's crazy. Williams is a complete afterthought right now. And I don't think there's a peep anywhere about him other than he ain't gonna have the job, which is crazy.
So I went out of the top 25 like overall, and Kevin, you brought up my guy, who's actually almost out of the top 25 depending on what metric you're looking at in his position group too. But I'm gonna go Keenan Allen here. I think that Keenan Allen, he's going into a contract year. Sure, he's got a new quarterback, but it's a quarterback that's been there. So there is some familiarity with the system, some familiarity between the two. And the other thing about, a wide receiver is only as good as the quarterback that's throwing to him. Well, Tyrell Taylor he plays it safe, right? Like Tyrell Taylor is going to play it safe, and Keenan Allen is going to be the beneficiary of that playing safe mode. I see that his targets go up because he will be kind of a safety valve. I think him and Hunter Henry will also, they'll kind of be the safety valve guys in the passing game with the Chargers. Last year, he almost had 1,200 yards, 104 targets, 6 touchdowns. I think you could probably expect to see something similar to that again this year out of him, even with Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert, whoever's playing quarterback there. I mean, if Justin Herbert goes in, then Keenan Allen's stock, in my opinion, goes way up because you're going to need a security blanket, and security blankets are hard to find in the NFL. It's either your tight end, your running back dump offs, but Keenan Allen's proven that he'll catch whatever's thrown his direction. So I think that will benefit the quarterbacks that are in play there. So I'm going Keenan Allen, who I think he's wide receiver 23, 24, 25, whatever metric you're looking at. But to me, that's the best value because you're getting essentially LA's top receiver, and his draft stock is falling because of the quarterback situation.
Right. Very true.
Yep. So I'm going to go with one that we haven't mentioned here. I had really good takes for Keenan Allen, for Damian Williams, for a lot of those things, but we've already mentioned that, and so I'm not going to just repeat the same old. But so a guy that you can get super deep in drafts, super, super deep, that's still going to provide a lot of value for you, is going to be Hunter Renfrow, a guy that you can typically pick up in about the 15th round. I think he's going, ADP has him like the 177th guy off the board right now, which puts him tail end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th, kind of in that range to it. And that's a guy that when you look at it last year, everybody was enthralled about Darren Waller coming out and really having that coming on the scene party and really having that breakout season at the tight end position. When you look at that back half, when Hunter Renfrow was in the games, Darren Waller's target share went way down. And a lot of that has to do with, the AFC West may have gotten rid of Captain Checkdown, sending Phillip Rivers out to Indianapolis. However, there's a new one in town vying for that title, and that's Derek Carr. And that's a guy that, much like you just said about Tyrod Taylor, he wants to play it safe, wants to throw those, those shorter routes, those high completion type of targets. And when you look at what they've got on the outside, they put a lot of speed on the outside, a lot of burners to try and go through there. So when that's not immediately open, I see him going to the check down, and that's going to be Hunter Renfrow going over the middle. And I see a lot of workload picking up for him. He's not going to be a guy that's going to, break open and really have that breakout season, but it's going to have a guy that's going to give you a ton of value, especially for where you've drafted him.
Yeah, big Renfrow fan here. I'm definitely going to try to scoop him up in quite a few drafts for sure this season. For me, for breakout, I thought about going Allen, or I'm sorry, what am I thinking? The other value. I was going to go Allen too on that. The next category, I'm jumping ahead. I apologize. The fantasy breakout players that we think are going to break out this season, build off a kick-ass year from last season, or just step on the scene out of nowhere. My pick was Miko Hardin for the Chiefs, and I'm trying to look for stuff or just kind of nuggets that I can find that can tell me a little more, maybe, that just you got to read between the lines kind of. And I saw a quote from the special teams coordinator, Dave Taub, I don't know how you say his last name, but what he was talking about, he's referring to Hardman here, and his quote was, "I'm not sure about Hardman. I don't want to lose him. I think he's just scratched the surface as a returner." And when I saw that or heard that, I'm like, I don't want to lose him. Is Andy Reid saying, hey, we got to get Hardman off special teams. I need him. I need him in this offense. We got to get him more touches, more looks. That kind of spoke to me, like, we read between the lines a little bit. Maybe there's going to be a different return man in KC this year. So if you look at Hardman, 22 years old, second round pick, in 19, he scored 6 touchdowns. He was averaging 20.7 yards a catch on 26 receptions, and that's a rookie season. So he was returning kickoffs. He had one for a touchdown. You got the speed with Tyreek Hill. You've got Kelsey. Hill and Kelsey are your top 2 pass catchers. But Hardman's going to make a push, I think, for more targets than Sammy Watkins, maybe Robinson too, just because of his explosiveness. And if you're looking around the league, it's, obviously that's the trend. The Ravens with Jackson and Marquise Brown, the Eagles just took a ton of speed on offense. We talked about them in our last podcast with you guys here. And just, it's downfield, man. Everybody's trying to get downfield. So if you can get Hill, Hardman in packages on the field, I think he's going to push for a lot more playing time in the 2020 season. So Hardman, to me, he's like a wide receiver 3, flex upside, with Mahomes throwing the football a lot more consistently than he did last season. So he's a guy I think could definitely break out, step on the scene, and really, really make some crazy type plays. Hardman and Brown, imagine those two on the same team. The speed alone, it's crazy. There's so many fast guys now. Every offense is trying to go after and get that little centerpiece speed guy, Tyreek Hill, a la, Deshaun Jackson. List goes on, but I think the Chiefs are onto something here with him and Hill and some packages here. I like Andy Reid. He can come up with something cool and get them rolling.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in before my co-hosts hit you with some really good information. I struggled with
Did you really?
Breakout concept. Yeah,
somebody's got to step on the scene. Somebody's got to step on the scene, right?
So here's where I finally came down to, and I don't know, you guys probably ripped me for this one, but the name that I settled on was Drew Locke. I think, for all of the, the pieces that are in place there in Denver, they have a lot of mouths to feed. which probably doesn't bode very well for those mouths to be fed, but the person feeding them is going to benefit off of that. Drew Locke only played, he started 5 games last year, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, had over 1,000 yards. That's a small sample size, but I honestly think that he's got the confidence of the head coach. He's got the confidence of the offense. He's got the confidence of the team to move forward and have a pretty good year. Again, that's based solely on the fact that he has so many toys to play with that I think it's going to benefit him. And that's why I'm going with him as the breakout player. And really that's a building on, I guess. It's a building on of what we kind of saw last year where it was okay. You know, it was refreshing to see a capable quarterback again in Broncos orange. So I went with Drew Locke here as my breakout, and his ADP is super low. So I mean, like, you want to talk some value too. You know, that's a guy that you can target and still in a 2 quarterback league or in a super flex league. Like, Drew Locke is a guy that you're going to want to probably keep your eye on just because of what that offense looks like it could be on paper.
Yeah, I took him in a super flex last week draft, and it was like the weapons he's got. I mean, he's really set up for success. He's got some good pieces around him, and it's kind of hard to ignore. So when he's sitting on the board, I'm like, shit, I'm taking him. It's a decent pick, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to stay on the Broncos train here just because it's hard to label Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce.
Right, yeah.
Or, Pat Mahomes is a breakout candidate.
Yeah.
Like, you got to go.
Yeah, you got to dive a little.
A lot of the Chiefs.
Yeah, you got to dive a little deeper in the AFC West.
I'm going to go with Courtland Sutton. And I'm saying this because I understand that, here in our hometown, he goes a little bit higher in drafts because he's the hometown guy. But if you look at the national rhetoric, and if you get into drafts on a kind of a national stage and take guys from different positions and thoughts and everything else, Sutton's going anywhere from the mid-3rd to the late 4th round. So you're drafting him as, your RB1, maybe your RB2. But I think this year he is going to clearly cement himself inside that top 10 wide receiver position. I think he's going to end up with somewhere around 87 catches. He'll be over, I have him just over 1,200 yards. And I expect his touchdowns to be up there too. See, he's going to have a monster year. There are a lot of weapons in Denver, but although Drew Locke has been throwing daily with Jerry Judy, rookie wide receivers do tend to struggle with the learning curve as cornerbacks play differently in the NFL than they did in college ball. So when in doubt, you go to old reliable. And Drew Locke showed that he has the ultimate faith in Courtland Sutton for those 5 games last year. And Courtland Sutton gave his all for Drew Locke, diving left and right to catch passes for him, making ridiculous grabs, running after the catch, just, all the extra little work, fighting off that corner to make sure he got separation. He's that guy for me. And I think that as the Broncos team grows, Drew Locke and Courtland Sutton will be I think they're going to be a very good tandem, but I think specifically for 2020, Sutton is going to step on the scene as a guy that you need to really consider putting up there right after your top tier of, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and possibly Tyreek Hill, depending on what metric you're using, because you kind of have those top 4, and then after that, people scratch their head a little bit. I think it's clearly going to be Courtland Sutton stepping up into that, second tier and towards the top of it going forward.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely a big fan of his too, man.
Yep, that was definitely where I was going to go. That's what I had written on my sheet of paper here. Luckily for me, I also had a backup written down there too. So
you write stuff on paper?
Yeah. I'm old school, man. Old school.
That is old school.
Exactly. So it's one that when I was looking at this category, it was kind of tough because you look at like the Chiefs, right? The only guy that really you could say could have the breakout would be Miko Hardin. We already covered that one. The Chargers, really, there's I don't see a breakout candidate there at all, just from the standpoint that Keenan Allen, you know what you got. You already saw the breakout happen with Eckler last year, and I don't know the narrative that we've already talked about Tyrod being the safe guy. I don't know that Mike Williams is going to be the really going to get as much play as everybody thinks he is, simply from the standpoint that I don't see Tyrod throwing the ball down the field enough to make that a breakout. Just don't see it happening. But when it's all said and done, the Raiders, young team there, those rookies, they typically, you won't see them start to develop and pop until probably weeks 8 and 9, and that may be a little bit longer this year due to condensed training camps and everything going on in the world right now, where they may not, you may not see them pop until later on than you traditionally do, which, about halfway through the season. So I am going to go back to the Broncos on this one. Drink the hometown Kool-Aid here, I guess. But Noah Fant would be the breakout candidate that I would have here. Kind of some low-hanging fruit, I'm not going to lie, from the standpoint that when you look at the tight end position, it is, wide open as far as the positional rankings go there. You typically have your top 3, top 4 guys kind of locked up there, and everybody else is wide open. And you can see guys in that position go from, being an obscure nobody that was on, practice squads and that kind of stuff to finishing tight end 3, tight end 4 on the year, a la Darren Waller last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Big fan.
I'm gonna foreshadow a little bit. We're gonna have some fun here in 2 categories.
For the next ones?
No, in the undraftable categories.
Okay. We'll get the good stuff down there. Before that one though, let's hit the surprise player of 2020. And these are just going to be some guys that are going to surprise you. Maybe that's, you go, where in the hell did he come from? Or who knows? Who knows what these players turn into? But regardless, they're going to be a surprise for 2020. I'm going to go with Tyrell Williams, going back to the Raiders. I think Tyrell Williams can get back on track. He had the foot issues last season. He's going to have a second season under Chucky, under John Gruden. And the only concern is just who's throwing him the damn ball, right? He's got Hunter Renfrow, who we talked about. He's got Ruggs, Williams. They're going to demand attention. Waller, I'm sorry. They're going to demand attention as well. I think he could kind of slide into that offense and make some noise if the Raiders do get into some pass-heavy stuff and actually develop some kind of chemistry on offense or identity that they can show up and hang with some teams. If they want any shot in this AFC West, they're going to have to air it out, especially with the Chiefs. And they're going to have to stay in games to play. So I think Williams could come back and have a decent season. I'm not saying he's going to be a world beater, but I think he's got a solid opportunity to deliver on his free agent, his 2019 free agent expectations when he came over to the Raiders. And it was like, oh, finally, got decent receiver. Maybe he makes some noise. He's hopping around the AFC West too. He's on the Chargers, but I think he's got a good opportunity there, and he doesn't have to be the guy, but if he can be a piece of that pie on offense, he should do well.
Well, once again, before my co-host drops some good knowledge on you, I'm going to jump in here. So for what it's worth, the show notes here, it was AFC West Surprise Player of 2020, and I took that open to interpretation.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. This stuff is good. This is a good thing.
Yeah, and so I think the surprise player of 2020 will be Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, but not for any good reasons. I don't think that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to live up to the expectations that people have of him and where he's being drafted. This is kind of this podcast. I guess our group is turned into the CEH hater group, if you will. But so here's the problem. Here's the issue, and we've talked about this on our show. This offseason, with how much missed time these rookies are going to have,
it's a lot.
Or are having, it is a ton. We're talking about missed rookie mini camps, missed OTAs, missed mini camps. That is a lot of time for these rookies where they're not seeing NFL caliber players and they're not playing NFL caliber. They're not seeing NFL caliber reps, I guess, is what I want to say in practice. So for those reasons, I don't think Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to explode on the scene as many people think. I think that Damian Williams is going to command a lot of that backfield there in Kansas City. I don't know that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to be able to bully his way into getting those touches and to getting those snaps. And I have a bold prediction that I think is a very likely reality, in that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, the biggest thing for rookie running backs is making sure that you can pass protect and pick up blitzing linebackers and making sure that you can protect your quarterback. I have a feeling that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to miss an assignment on a blitz, get his quarterback lit up, and then he is going to ride the bench until he figures out how to read it. NFL defense, because you are not going to mess around with Pat Mahomes and his health. And the second you let him get lit up, that's going to be on you, kid. So I went with Clyde Edwards-Hilaire as the surprise, but not in a good way. I just don't think he's going to live up to the hype that everybody seems to have around this guy.
No, that's good. It's good perspective to go both ways. So hell yeah, absolutely.
Been toying back and forth with a couple here, and I'm tossing this one out just because Derek denounced it earlier. The surprise player of 2020 in the AFC West is going to be Mike Williams. It is going to be Mike Williams. This kid,
his name's going to get brought up again here soon.
But this is finally it. This is it, right?
This is it, right? Like
he's got to do it.
Not to the point where he's going to be like wide receiver 1, but based off of where you're drafting him, there's no way he only has 1 or 2 touchdowns again. The kid is too good. Like, it was just stupid, bad NFL luck that he didn't fall into the end zone a couple more times with the volume that he did see last year. He's fought off some injury bugs, yes, but he is still a supreme athlete. He has good hands. He has no issue high pointing a football. His target radius is actually greater than Keenan Allen's, believe it or not. You just see Keenan Allen dominate the target share under Phillip Rivers. I think that's going to change a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. And even if Mike Williams just makes more of the same amount of targets, you're going to see this. So, guys, I think are giving up on him. You have a lot of people, saying he's a bust. He's not worth it. I have zero issue taking a flyer on Mike Williams as my wide receiver 3 in some leagues, and then watching it pan out, because there's a good chance he's going to end up being your starting wide receiver 2 by the end of the season.
Should be there. Most people are pretty much done with him, so it's a could go in that value pick too, because he'll slide, I'm sure, just as well in drafts where people are like, Williams, they'll take somebody else in that neighborhood. Yeah,
absolutely. I see the upside there. I see the progression in his route running and his route tree, and I just think that leads to success. He is more than a 9-route receiver now. When he came out of college, that's typically all the Chargers used, that's typically all the Chargers used him for. But I see that route tree expanding. You are going to see him create a little bit more separation, especially on some in-breaking routes, which he's not particularly known for, to be able to get that run after the catch and kind of split the 2 safeties and go. You're going to see a little bit more of that this year.
For sure. Who you got there?
Well, I took this one as, who's going to be surprising based on, kind of the narrative being spun in the fantasy world right now, right? Like, so 2 names kind of popped to mind. Keenan Allen was one. It's one that I see him as being surprising because he's going to not be surprising, meaning that you look at it, he is Mr. Consistency when you look at the wide receiver position, and I see him putting up much the same. And the fantasy narrative out there a lot is that he is going to have a massive regression without Phillip Rivers there to throw him the ball all the time. But we've already covered that a little bit, that I think Tyrod and Herbert are going to use him a little bit as that safety blanket, and we'll see that come to fruition there. But moreover, I see Damian Williams being a huge surprise this year. Kevin already spoke to this one a little bit earlier, and we've said it on our show many times that Damian Williams was rightfully the Super Bowl MVP this past year, and Pat Mahomes was the guy that won that, but but Damian Williams had a great run up to it. The narrative around him is that, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to take all of the workload. People are trying to, substitute Kareem Hunt's rookie year into a Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, and I don't see that happening. I think Damian Williams is going to have a ton of workload, and you're going to see almost a 50-50 type of split when it's said and done at the end of the season. So he's going to have a much better season than a lot of people are giving him credit for at the beginning, I believe.
So it's a pretty big Damian Williams house here. Yeah, I'm on
board.
And
it's not that we don't like Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. Like he is the heir apparent. There's no doubt about it. I think in a normal year, maybe you do think of him a lot of the ways that I'm going to say the general narrative is already believing, that he's going to step in and kind of just take over those snaps. But this year in 2020, we have learned that, the only thing certain is chaos in 2020.
That's for sure.
And Clyde Edwards-Hilaire being, nominated by the fantasy community as a top 12 running back, days after being drafted by the Chiefs, and him not panning out to that's going to create chaos in the fantasy ranks here a little bit. And I'm choosing to not believe that narrative at this point. Like, he's just not going to reach there. Will he? Absolutely. He has the skill set to get there, but it's not this season.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify that as well. I think he's going to be a good in this league, just not in 2020.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. If I've got the 101 in a dynasty, that's the guy I'm taking. Like, I think year 2, year 3, he is going to be the guy in Kansas City. But I think this year alone, Damian Williams is going to get a lot more run than people are giving him credit for.
Yeah, I think, that's what's funny on Twitter. I mean, every season there's a player like this. Every season there's somebody just latches on, they take off, maybe they throw out a hype video, and it is like there's no looking back, man. And if you don't jump on that train, what's wrong with you, right? Nobody cares about why you may not be in on this player, but we should all listen and be like, okay, well, yeah, I get it, I could see that, even if I don't agree with it, similar to other conversations and stuff. But like, a lot of the time I think people blur the lines with fantasy thought versus real life NFL thought, and they're the same world, yet they're two separate worlds in essence, and you can't throw all your eggs in the fantasy basket and expect that to pay off in real life. It just doesn't go like, sometimes it does. There's angles and things and certain situations that play out along the same lines, but overall, I mean, it's two different animals. So yeah, I'm in the same boat with you guys. I totally agree with old Clyde there. I love the guy. I think he'll definitely take over too. But man, 2020, it's just too jacked up. I just can't. He doesn't have a good opportunity to come off with a strong start. Second season in a good camp, off season fully, and normalcy in the league and mini camps and whatnot. Then hell yeah, why not? So with that one, the AFC West undraftable player. I love undraftable player picks because we all have guys that we absolutely hate or we are just not going to touch with a 10-foot pole no matter what. And I had Eric Ebron in my other fantasy article I dropped because that is like my primo number one of all players in the NFL. But for the AFC West, I was going Jason Witten because I don't know what it is about Witten. I liked him as a player and I respect his game and stuff, but just in the fantasy world, I think I had him in a league maybe once or twice, and he was meh, and I never picked him up again. I never tried to get him, no matter how desperate I was, because there was always somebody better. But not everybody, but I do hear pockets of people going, well, he's a solid tight end. I take him, and I don't want him. I don't want him at all. He's averaging 8 points a game, which isn't awful. It's not terrible, but those 8 points come in waves, I think. And I don't really think he improves the Raiders' offense, even if Darren Waller's healthy. And to me, I don't think Witten should be drafted in any format. I'd rather have Waller no matter what. He's the playmaker. He's got the range. He's the height. I mean, the real deal as far as a tight end goes. So Witten is off my board. I'll draw the line and scratch him out. Who do you guys have?
I think, first off, I think you're absolutely right with Witten. I think he was brought in to the Las Vegas Raiders to run block and be a mentor in that locker room for all the young players that they have around, because Jason Witten is a phenomenal run blocking tight end.
Yeah.
And has been for his career. And you kind of lose sight of that because he has, so many high benchmark receiving yards and catches and touchdowns because he was Dak's security blanket. And even long before Dak was even there with the litany of guys that kind of ran through Dallas for a little while there. But I agree with you on Witten. My guy is any Raiders pass catcher before the 14th round. Any of them. I don't want any of them. I'm not taking Darren Waller. I think the hype on him is still too high. I think he's a great recession candidate, and you're going to overpay for him. I don't like Tyrell Williams at all. I don't think he's the answer there. Rookie wide receiver, pass on year one. Thank you. And so on and so forth. So the only one that I might consider is Renfro, and that's if he falls to me in the 15th, because I won't take him in the 14th. So I am fading every single Raiders pass catcher before the 15th round.
There you go.
So for me, the low-hanging fruit on this one was Royce Freeman. If absolutely undraftable, but move beyond the low-hanging fruit there, and just from a draft capital type of deal and what I'd have to spend versus what I can get around that would be, I'm going to take a different one, Alex, just because I think I know where you're going. So I'm going to take Austin Eckler on this one, because he's a guy that you've got to take in the early second round. And even with going through and doing some of our consensus rankings, some of that, we had him as a running back 1 in our consensus rankings, but he's not a guy that I see finishing where you've got to draft him. I think you can get some better value around him. So that's a guy that I'm going to leave on the board if he's sitting for me in the second round.
I really thought you were going Sammy Watkins there.
Far more likely to go Mike Williams.
Speaking of Mike Williams, that's where I'm going. Undraftable, Mike Williams. I am not touching him with a 10-foot pole, and here is why. Last year, he had 1,001 yards on 49 catches and just the 2 touchdowns. With a gun-slinging quarterback, with Phillip Rivers, who has never seen a throw that he will shy away from. That is not going to happen anymore with the Chargers. Tyrod Taylor, who knows what we're going to see out of him. But Mike Williams is a deep threat guy in an offense that's not going to have a deep threat quarterback. He averaged, 20 yards per catch last year? That's not happening with Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is going to look at Mike Williams streaking down the field. If that cornerback is within 15 feet around the football. So to me, Mike Williams is a guy who, for his purpose on that offense, I am not touching with a 10-foot pole. Maybe that comes back to bite me. I don't know, but I am not drafting Mike Williams this year. I see a major regression in terms of yards, in terms of catches, and I don't know how it's harder to regress from 2 touchdowns, but I think that could also see a regression as well. I am not buying any stock in Mike Williams. Get him 1,000 feet away from my rosters.
Great stuff. I love it. He'll regress from 2 to 1.
There's a reason you haven't won a championship. You're fading the wrong guys.
Probably fair, but Mike Williams, not going to have it this year. It's not going to happen.
That's great. Going on from undraftable to rookies that we will target heavily in the draft. I'm going back to the Broncos, Jerry Judy, man. We talked about Drew Locke. You're Drew Locke. I know there's some overlap in here, but for Judy, the guy is savvy. He can locate soft spots. He gets open on the scramble type plays, tracks the ball well. He's got the speed to threaten vertically, soft hands, body control, everything you need for a quarterback that may not get you that ball between the numbers, in the chest, whatever, throw you open kind of stuff. So I think for a young quarterback kind of polishing his game, Drew Locke, to have Judy, I think he fits right in. It's almost like it's a perfect match. I mean, he's got some time to improve his game as a quarterback, while Judy's going to do what he does. And as Locke improves, then Judy likely takes it next level. So for a rookie target, he's my pick all day long. I love him as a receiver. He's probably one of my top guys on the rookie board.
Okay, again, before my co-host dropped some great knowledge on you, I'm also on the Jerry Judy train, because I've seen the reports of Drew Locke working with him in Denver. I've seen that rapport is starting to be built, and that's important.
Big time.
That's important, and also in football, you know, the newer you are to whatever level, this holds true in college for the most part, and I think it holds true in the NFL too. The further away from the football you are, the easier it is to have an impact early. What I mean by that is, if you're an offensive lineman, it's going to be hard to break onto the scene and be okay and understand, you know, the style of play that's expected of you. But the further out you are, you know, running routes is running routes. Catching the football is catching the football if you're a wide receiver. There's not that much that's really asked of you. It's just, can you develop and figure things out? So I'm big on Jerry Judy. I'm also big, I guess, on Henry Ruggs for the same reasons. And I think that they've got a quarterback that'll be able to find the football, find him with the football. Be it Derek Carr, be it Marcus Mariota. I think that Henry Ruggs will have an impact early. And then I also, depending on what kind of a league you're in, for as much bashing as I did of Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, I'll probably also target him as a rookie as well, especially if I'm in a dynasty league. Like I said, I don't think that this year is the Clyde Edwards-Hilaire year, but for sure, I think years 2 and 3 and 4, those are going to be years that you're going to want to have Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. So if you're in a dynasty league, I'm going Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, but for this year, I'm out on that. I'd go Judy or Ruggs.
Yeah, nice.
Judy is, I think, kind of the clear and obvious answer for the value that you get him at, right? Like and that's what ultimately fantasy is, right? It's turning value into, you know, points on your roster to win games. There's too much of a narrative around Clyde Edwards-Hilaire and him being drafted in a lot of cases now in the top 24. Like, that is outrageous in my eyes, because of all the things that we've spoke on before that. So in a redraft format, I think Jerry Judy's kind of the obvious answer for me, at least. I don't see Derek Carr, you know, connecting with Henry Ruggs right away, because Derek Carr does like to check the ball down. As much as Gruden wants to stretch the field to give Derek Carr, you know, more windows to throw in, Derek Carr ultimately is the one making the decision and deciding where that football goes every snap. And I don't think he's willing to risk a 3-interception game to get benched by Marcus Mariota replacing him. So I think Derek Carr is going to play it safe again. You're going to see a lot of, you know, you're going to see Darren Waller a lot. You're going to see Hunter Renfrow, a lot of Josh Jacobs, a ton of that. And so all that fades Henry Ruggs for me. And Judy's kind of he's the clear number 2 in Denver. He's the guy who makes the most sense. He will line up on the starting roster every single week as long as he's healthy. So I don't see any other option in this division for a place to go.
Yeah, and that's one of those that it was this year for the AFC West was far tougher to pick that rookie that you're targeting. Like last year, you look at it, Josh Jacobs all day long, every day. This year was a much tougher road on that one, and they had a lot of skill positions drafted in the first round, early second round, that gave them the draft capital that you're going to see a lot of things shape up and take place there. So I'm going to, you know, kind of stay with everybody else saying Jerry Judy here, but I don't know that breakout happens early in the season, even with the fact that he's building chemistry with Drew Locke and they're having throwing sessions, you know, during this offseason and that kind of stuff. Just from the standpoint that when you look historically at rookies, they take a little bit of time to really get adjusted to the game and break out. And you know, even great talents that we've seen recently come in last year you had guys like Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. You had a lot of really good rookie type of receivers come in that were starting guys for their team week one, but they took some time to really start finding their role and finding that breakout to happen. And I see a very similar thing happen with Judy this year, where you'll start to see him really start to pop in kind of that back half of the season. But the first 7-8 weeks are probably going to be a little bit tough from a fantasy standpoint. He'll show up, he'll put up some decent games, but that back half is really where I think you start to see him pop.
I definitely agree to that. The back end of the season, when things start coming together, for sure. I think the season overall, don't you feel like the NFL as a whole is going to start slow with all this stuff with the camps? And I just feel like it's going to be maybe a sluggish start. Teams that start slow normally may look a little worse. Other teams that we're not used to seeing start slow may get off, out of the gate a little slower than normal. But then I feel like mid to end quarters of the season is when things will start clicking. Teams will be who they are. They'll shape up. The field will play itself out, and you'll see where everybody truly is, kind of where you thought. But I think it's going to take a little longer this season.
I think the 2020 season's a lot. I think a lot of the narrative for the first half of the season is going to be roster retention from 2019.
Yeah.
So you're going to see the 49ers, the Ravens, the Chiefs kind of be almost that supreme three to start the season because they kept so much of their rosters intact. I think you'll see the Broncos improve because for the most part, they kept their roster intact with their biggest loss obviously is Chris Harris Jr., but offensively, they didn't lose anybody to speak of, and they brought in more pieces and some more weapons, and you kind of go from there. The Raiders are the wild card on what they can do with their receiving core. Just if I'm wrong about Terrence Williams and he can take that next step, and they have some help from the rookies, that offensive line in in Las Vegas is still really good. Like, they are still a run plowing offense. And so if they can lean on Josh Jacobs, maybe the Raiders look better out of the gate than what we're all expecting, just because the offensive line stayed put and their quarterback and running back are the same. So you lean on that for the first few weeks and kind of go from there. But with all the turnover in other aspects of the league, I think you're absolutely right. The top half of the teams that kept their rosters intact will look better, a lot better, I think, at least through the first 4 weeks than the teams that had a ton of turnover.
Yeah, the veteran teams against like the younger teams as far as just, roster, yep.
Just teams in general that have new pieces in key positions, that's we're going to see them stumble, I think, a little bit more than what you might expect. I think of like a Tampa Bay, I think that's going to be there's going to be some learning curves there. I just think that with what this offseason is and how much work isn't being done, physical work that isn't being done, that we are going to see some slow starts out of some teams. But the teams that largely remain the same from last year will probably have that advantage.
Yeah. And hey, at the top I said we had 6 categories. I misspoke. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a bonus 7th. I completely spoofed here. The AFC West player on your fantasy radar, maybe a guy that you're not really going to go in after. Just got your eye on him, see where things shake out amongst his team in real life or fantasy, where he gets slotted. Who knows? Whatever you've got your eye on, it's a radar pick. And I was going to pick here KJ Hamler off the Broncos roster. I look at this guy, and he's like, I think he's an immediate spark out of the slot, and you can run him out deep or verticals, whatever, crossing routes. And we talked about Judy. We all love Judy in the first round. Broncos take him. He's out there, pick him, set him and forget him. But the Broncos are stacked now, I think, in the passing game with Locke. So there's plenty of targets to move around in Denver, and I'm curious to see where Hamler ends up being in the pecking order. But for the fantasy radar, he is definitely on it for me. Whether I draft him, maybe I do, maybe I don't. It depends on, where he ends up in the pick, in the draft, where he falls to me, where I would pick him, where I wouldn't, and the neighborhood of players in his area. how I feel at the draft, that's always a question mark depending on how many beers I drank and whatnot. So either way, if I don't draft him, he's going to be hot off the waivers. He's going to be on my watch list. So give me a player that type on your fantasy radar for 2020.
So Kevin said it best earlier in the episode. You're going to want a piece of the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And if you can't get a Pat Mahomes or a Damian Williams, I mean, the guy that I'm going to keep my eye on and try to figure out, what's going on is Miko Hardin. That's a guy that I'm going to keep my eyes on and make sure that if I can get that piece of the Kansas City offense, then I would be okay with that. That's a guy will be on the list, and I will be watching what's going on as my pick comes up in each round to make sure that I might be that piece of the Kansas City offense, because I'm not going to go after a Travis Kelce or if I can get a Pat Mahomes, that's great. But if I don't get any of those pieces, you do want that piece of the Kansas City offense because there will be points there. So Miko Hardin is the guy that I have there.
I think for me, it goes back to I'm definitely keeping an eye on Damian Williams, just because teams are so heavy on Edwards-Hilaire that I want to see how far he can get and just how much value I think I can get out of that. I think there's a good value there. I'm going to keep an eye on Drew Locke. It's going to be harder in our hometown league just because, the cat's out of the bag there. Everybody's a Broncos fan. So it's going to go earlier in our league than probably what I would want to draft him at for this season. But, that's kind of one of those things. And then I think another one that I'd really kind of keep on my radar is a Philip Lindsay type, knowing that he's not going to be my number one back, my number two back, but he's a solid presence that has what I would deem a consistent floor to, in case of emergency, break glass, and I'm not scratching the waiver wire for crumbs and just trying to fill something out on my roster that's not going to be a zero.
Yeah, for me, it's actually a slightly different running back that I'd be targeting, and that's Melvin Gordon, a guy that in our own consensus ranking, we had him at running back 18, but when you look at ADP, he's a guy that is going in the third, sometimes fourth round, just depending upon where you're drafted. Now, obviously, in our hometown league, that's not going to happen that way, but in a lot of leagues, you can pick him up in a third or fourth round. You can pick him up as your third running back on your team, or you can really stack the box with a couple of solid wide receivers there in rounds 2 and 3 and pick him up in that fourth in a lot of cases. And that's a guy that I think you're going to get a ton of value, and a guy that's going to outperform his ADP and will give you a very good floor, because I think he's going to be a guy that puts up a fair bit of touchdown work there. Philip Lindsay is going to spell him, and you're going to see kind of that same dynamic that you saw with him last year and the year before in LA. But he's going to take a lot of that, early running work, and you're going to see that goal line work, and he's going to have a pretty decent floor and really be able to provide a lot of value for your team.
Excellent. Well, I like those picks, man. Those are good categories to do. They're always fun to change it up and stay away from some of the same old, as far as busts and the typical stuff. But drafts are coming up. What are you guys doing to get ready here? You prepping and researching, or what are you putting together here? You got some under your belt already?
Yeah, Alex probably doesn't have as many, but I think Derek and I each have our fair share of close to 20 different leagues right now that we've already drafted in. So just kind of going through some motions there. Obviously, we're still doing our, the good old boys composites. We're wrapping up the quarterback segment. We just got done with the running backs, and then we'll jump into receivers. So that's kind of going through some of that.
Cool.
And then a lot of it's just staying up on the news. What are these coaches saying? What's kind of the little things that's being reported by other podcasts and stuff that they're hearing in areas of the country that we're not in, right? So, if I'm really wanting a piece of that Ravens offense, but I don't know if I need to, wait and go to J.K. Dobbins, or if it's going to be,
Ingram or Edwards?
Excuse me. If it's going to be, yes, an Ingram Edwards show. I want to listen to guys who are on the East Coast. We talked to a guy last night who's from the outskirts of Boston. That's a hell of a lot closer to Baltimore than I am here in Colorado. So it's just those types of things.
Hell yeah. That's good stuff, man. I got you covered on Ravens too. I got all my family out there, or Packers here because I'm stuck in Wisconsin. So either one, those are my two teams. But yeah, you got to do that. You got to scout in the off season. You got to prep for how you want to attack your draft. Guys that you're after, guys you like, guys you don't. So there's all kinds of strategy angles, man. And like you said, the coaches now, I think with all the Zoom calls and this and that, it seems like they're all starting to get a little either comfortable with it, and maybe they'll let some stuff slide because it's not so formal in person, face to face, right? They're comfortable at home. Maybe they're sitting there in their freaking boxers, hanging out with a polo team shirt, right? Or they're getting aggravated.
Pants check.
Or they're getting aggravated.
Andy Reid in his Hawaiian shirt and his boxers, just sitting there with a cheeseburger.
Or they're getting fed up and aggravated, and you can get some good stuff out of them. So when I hear them on, sports radio or wherever podcasts, I'll give them a good listen and see if there's something I can find. Like I said, with that Chiefs one, special teams guy, and just kind of read between the lines, or maybe get a little nugget that maybe they didn't intend on giving, but you can do something with. So excellent. That's good stuff today. That's going to wrap up the show. So before we jump back in and give everybody a rundown on what you guys are doing. I know you just wrapped up a lot of the team previews. So if we talked about the AFC West today, but on the Good Old Boys podcast, they're covering every division, every team. If you want to scroll back through, you will find your team of choice and some great takes and great breakdown specifics on every team with some killer guests for each team, which is really cool.
Yeah, we had you on a couple episodes. That was an absolute blast to record. I want to thank you for having us on tonight. This was an absolute blast to record with you as well. And we're just kind of going through the team. Started from your first pick Bengals all the way up, and we're still working our way up towards the Chiefs, who will round that out. But we've got a lot of stuff coming out on the socials as well. We're working through our consensus rankings by position right now. Kevin and Alex alluded to it a little bit earlier. We'll get the quarterbacks out here soon, but followed by the wide receivers, tight ends. So those will be coming at you. Running backs are already released.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely good stuff. I love chatting it up with you guys. 3 great football minds in the fantasy community, and that goes for normal real life NFL as well. So yeah, great takes, and I love the feedback. Absolutely, you guys are a great crew. And then absolutely follow them on Twitter at GoodOldBoysFF, and then the YouTube channel, you've got to lock that in and subscribe there as well. Thanks again, guys, for jumping on, and we will chat with you again.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks,
Frank.
Anytime.
Yeah, all right, this press conference is over.
Go away.
No, it's over, Phil.
Well, please,
It's over.